Welcome everyone. Welcome Rose Foley. Rose, delighted to have you here with me today. Rose, can you tell the audience a bit about yourself?
Yeah, like Rose, many years ago I did my undergrad in art and design, and I kind of fell into aviation. And after a long time in aviation, I was offered the opportunity to take voluntary redundancy, which was brilliant because I took the opportunity to go back to college and upskill. And ideally, my aim was to fall back on my creative interests, really. So I studied English literature, and I went on then to do MA in digital cultures, which gave me a brilliant opportunity to look at narrative design for the digital age, really. Since then, I obviously sat the postgrad for design thinking. The reason I did this was because I was curious to see where my transferable skills lie, and design thinking and the postgrad was the perfect opportunity to do so. Yeah, and so here we are now.
Yeah, that's it. And you remind me of something, Rose, as well. I remember just prior to you starting, we had a conversation, or was it just after you started? And I suppose maybe that concern that you wouldn't have to suppress that creativity.
Yeah.
So I suppose, was that realized? Were you able to express your creativity on a program like this, do you think?
I remember that very well. It was week 2. I kind of panicked because I realized that everybody around me were from very, very different industries and backgrounds, and I genuinely thought that I was put into the wrong course. Everybody had very responsible jobs, whereas I was interested in arts, which was, literature, theatre, video games, and I felt being in a class with very business savvy people, entrepreneurs and very, very impressive people. I thought that there was a mismatch, but the design thinking as the course went on, it's difficult to describe, but it felt like a necessary learning curve, because again, that I was looking at my transferable skills. I think it was a course I needed, and it was a course that did allow me to explore creatively, but in a business context, so my creativity.
Yeah, and that's very interesting, Rose, because I would have also said that there was probably probably about 20-25% of people that would be very creative joined the program, but actually in some ways they became the most valuable people on some of the teams because they had something that the others didn't have, and I hope you maybe experienced that somewhat. And actually I think even towards the end they were nearly the revered, the creative types, or bringing that maybe magic element, the creativity element into some of the projects.
Probably, yeah. I think creativity and people that are creative, they tend to work alone for a lot of the time. They write books, they write music. It's quite an individual process, but working with the team and being in a position in a learning experience where you have to look at different things from other people's perspectives, it kind of forced that kind of behavior to kind of come through, the kind of creative thinking and the ability to kind of, well, I called it at one stage throw my grenades in, which was just to kind of turn things upside down, because they might not be working in one way. So it did come through.
And we need that. We need someone that thinks differently, though, that sees the world differently, to, I suppose, throw those grenades, as you say. And of course, we also had the artists in residence that are part of the program. Rose, you already mentioned it. You mentioned, games and gaming, and that's part of your creative outlet. But it was also a core part of the project you undertook. Can you tell us a bit about that project?
Yeah. Well, the course, the way it was structured, is 2 very separate semesters. One was learning the design thinking as a process, and the second part was where you go off and do your own work. But what I recognized in the first part, although I felt at times a bit muted, where I couldn't be so creative, I recognized there was some similar behaviors happening with video games. The idea of a community of practice, people using different skills, and we often see this in massive multiplayer online gaming, you know, where people have character sets that are built up specifically for, I don't know, like you could magical properties, you could have distance players or combat players that are close contact, so things like axes as opposed to bows and arrows. But ultimately gamers do have the same behaviors, and they have the same kind of mindset that design thinking is attempting to promote. So the second semester I thought it'd be interesting to see if we could actually build a design thinking role-playing game, which I hadn't seen in any of the literature or any of the literature had really kind of come up in the course that I'd been going through. So that's where my project, that's why I started my project, because it was familiar, but it wasn't acknowledged really.
Yeah, and like you did very extensive sort of reading, Rose, which was very noticeable to know that you were going back looking for, I suppose, even back to the core of design thinking, trying to figure out where does gaming and design thinking come together. Can you explain to the audience, Rose, for those not familiar with, you know, role playing and role play gaming, RPG, as you might refer to it?
Yeah, role playing game. One brilliant example of it in popular culture at the moment is Stranger Things. It's on, I think it's Netflix. It's out on, but it's a game that was made in the 70s, and it's basically a tabletop game where people fill out character sheets, and it's a fantasy game. So you could be different types of classes of players. You could be, I don't know, a troll, a wizard, a human, elf, etc. There's huge scope of play styles, and you roll the dice basically essentially to get the game going. But the thing about role-playing games is that it's not technically scripted. It promotes the idea of player interaction for to kind of decide where the story goes and how you explore and defeat the big bad monster at the end of the game, or the challenge really. So it's very open. True, it's kind of structured, but it still allows that kind of creative play and the ability to think outside the box and try something different, which again is similar to what design thinking does, but not necessarily said it.
Yeah, or it's similar to what design thinking should do, Rose.
True,
you know.
Yeah.
So I think your evidence was that design thinking doesn't necessarily do it, but it should do it. And like I'm intrigued by this idea of even the play styles, you know, and the different roles, you know. So what you're really saying is that, as I understand it anyway, Rose, is that for design thinking to work effectively, we need people that play different roles, you know, and that particularly, like you were saying, that sometimes the creative voice might be lost or some other voice might be lost. That in a way, the dice is a very interesting thing, because the dice is calling in and you know, those different roles to partake. So, Rose, what's your take? Will you be able to come up with some form of and I know you're well on the way as well. I know there's still lots of more of the journey to go, but do you feel you can come up with a game that will be relevant to gamifying or using game mechanics in for design thinking?
Absolutely. I don't see any reason why I shouldn't, because they're doing the same thing but in different context. Gaming is very much play activity. It's informal. You play with friends, family, you know, and it's an entertainment form. But design thinking is very much in a professional environment. But they're doing the same thing again. As I said, you've got people with very different sets of skills. You know, they've been trained in certain areas, you know, they've earned their qualifications in certain areas, they work in certain areas because it's what they prefer and what they like and what they enjoy. And the two worlds are doing the same thing, but there's huge potential for the two of them to come together. And particularly with technology today, you know, online, like the pandemic has reinforced again entirely about how different the work life is for us all now. Everything's online, but gaming's been doing that for a lot longer. Games embrace the digital a lot quicker than everyday business has done. So there is potential, I think. It might look different to how I first thought. I thought it would be a very analog, bits of paper, rule book. You can touch them, but there is potential for it to go virtual as well. So it'll be interesting to see where it goes, but who knows?
No, and of course, Rose, one of the big advantages as well, whether it's analog or digital, is the immersion part. We become immersed in this game. We nearly step out of our own physical body, and we partake maybe in this game. We become someone else, someone that's important to the evolution or the emergence of that game. So I think that's really inspiring, Rose. Rose, how and where are you going to go with this? I know you've got an award actually as a result of being on this program for the work and the research you're doing. Where are you going to go next with this?
Ideally, I'd love to actually continue the research and actually maybe try something, because at the moment it's very exploratory. It's only if, buts and maybes. It's quite messy, but there's an awful lot in it. There's a lot to be looked at, and there's a lot to be tried out, I suppose, even play tested, real world, but the potential is there. So I would really love to get cracking and actually maybe try it.
Yeah, and maybe that's a call to action for the community and the audience watching this as well, Rose. If someone is interested in collaborating with you on this, or even better again, could fund maybe a master's or something else in this space, Rose, it could be a great investment, and I think it's a really exciting journey. It is for me, watching how far you've gone with it, and also the anticipation of where you could go with it next. Rose, I know you spoke earlier about being that creative coming on a program like this. There might be other creatives that are thinking about coming on this program. Have you any hints, tips, advice for them?
Do it. Pure and simple. It's different. It's interesting. It offers a challenge to look at your own kind of creative skill set in a professional world. And again, like I said, times are changing, but embrace it, embrace the challenge. I mean, at the end of the day, it's one of the best things I never knew I needed, so I'm so happy that I actually did this course, and I stuck with it, because like you said earlier, I doubted an awful lot initially, but that learning curve was so valuable and really, really worth it. I'd do it again in a heartbeat. I'm just disappointed it's stopped at the moment.
Yeah, but look, hopefully you will go on, and it won't stop at a postgraduate diploma. There's plenty of more steps you can go with it, Rose. Also, I love that idea that sometimes we have to put ourselves in some sort of discomfort, so we start to see the value of ourselves through the eyes of others. And I really hope and I expect that you'll have seen the value that you brought to lots of the teams you worked on through the eyes of others, because for me it was very clear that was happening. Rose, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me. And I will say that it wasn't just me. I think it was the team around me that allowed me to be creative. I think that's very important, because I'm not just an individual. It's a team effort. My classmates were amazing, and it was, even the people that were around me, I learned so much from them, as well as from the lectures and the whole kind of course itself. I genuinely, one of the best things I never knew I needed.
Yeah, and I know even when you meet now your classmates, and the way they talk about each other, the way they look out for each other, the way they're supporting each other is fantastic, Rose. And I think that's
very protective.
Very protective, exactly. And supportive as well, which is great. Rose, thank you so much.
Thank you.